Hello and welcome. So today I'm just making some vanilla cupcakes. And so I'm going to get started. So the first thing that I've done is I have turned on my oven to preheat. That's an important thing. So you always want to preheat your oven. And depending on your style of oven, it can take some time to heat up to the right temperature. So if you do that at the start, when you want to start baking, then your oven can be preheating. I also like to set up my cupcake into the cupcake tin before I make the batter. So here I have a metal cupcake tin, and also I have the silicone one. They both work as well. I will say that if you are using a metal tin compared to a silicone, the cooking times can vary. So be aware of that. And I've also got some cupcake liners. Now, depending on what you want or what you can get, there are different types of liner. You might see this one. So this is the traditional cupcake liner that you will find, say, if you go to your local supermarket, and it fits nicely here. But you see, it is actually a small size cupcake liner, which I don't particularly like because there's just not a lot of space for decorating. I prefer to use bigger ones. So this one is a bit rumpled, but it will fit in, and you have a bigger diameter of your cupcake, but either would work fine. When you are buying your cupcake liners, I would say use the best quality cupcake liners that you can get, because they are more sturdy, they'll hold their weight, they won't get soggy, and you'll get better cupcakes. So this bit is pretty straightforward. Just slot it gently into your cupcake tins. One thing I would say is sometimes they stick together. If you're not careful, you'll actually use two cupcake liners for one hole, which is not the end of the world, but it's rather a waste of money. So I don't like doing that. But if you did, it will make no big difference. So let me just pop that aside, and I'm going to do the same in here. So these holes are slightly smaller than the cupcake liners, but it will fit still nicely. And just leave it in, don't push it in. When you pour in your cake batter, you'll find that the weight of the batter will push it in on its own, and it will still preserve the shape of that. So if you do that now, when the cake batter is ready, then it will be ready to go. So I'm just going to pop this aside until we're ready for it. So the cupcakes I'm making, they're just basic vanilla sponge cake, and it's an impromptu request from a family member for a couple of cupcakes. So I just using ingredients that I always have in my pantry. So this is sugar. I'm using caster sugar, which is a finer consistency of sugar. So it dissolves much better and quicker. So I recommend that you use caster sugar. If all you have is your normal white granulated sugar, then that still works. And flour. This is self-raising flour. So I quite like working with self-raising flour because it's already got leavening agents in. So it just means that I don't have to add baking powder. So it's the most basic type of vanilla sponge cake and uses less ingredients, and it's super easy to make for baking beginners. Of course, you are going to need butter. You can either use butter, or you can use margarine designed for baking. So this is a supermarket brand. It's margarine suited for baking. So you can use either, whichever floats your fancy. You're going to need vanilla extract. And if you are a subscriber to my channel, you would probably have heard me going on about using vanilla extract and not vanilla essence, because that is, you get good quality flavor in. Essence is actually artificial flavoring, which is just not as nice. So try and get good quality vanilla extract. Or if you can find vanilla bean paste, that works as well. Or if you want to go extra fancy, you can use the vanilla pod, but that requires some extra work to get the vanilla seeds out. So either the extract or the vanilla bean paste will work quite well. And then you need eggs. So that's the ingredients that you need. Now, this recipe is super easy. You work on a ratio of your egg weight. So I'm going to weigh the egg. So I know roughly for this amount of cupcake, I need about 3 eggs. That will be more than enough. So I'm going to weigh my eggs in the shell. I'm not sure if you can see the readings, but we'll weigh the eggs in the shell. And 3 eggs is about 196 grams. So we're going to be using 196 grams of all the other ingredients. Apart from the vanilla, of course, we're not going to be using 150 grams of vanilla. We're going to be using about 1 teaspoon, will be more than adequate. So let me just put that in a separate bowl and set that aside. So we use the creaming method. The creaming method is basically when you whip up your sugar and your butter or margarine together to incorporate air into the mixture, and that makes your mixture fluffy. And together, combined with the self-raising flour and the cream, butter, and sugar mixture, you will get a nice fluffy cake. So if you remember, we said we are going to use 195 grams of all the other ingredients. I'm just going to measure 195 grams of sugar in my bowl. And then I'm going to zero my weighing scale. So if you press the 0 button on your scale, I don't think I can quite show you that. Maybe one day I'll do a video on that. Or you can just measure it separately. But basically, you want to measure, again, 195 grams of your butter or your margarine, depending on what you are doing, into that bowl. So 195. With most cakes, you want to be using butter that's at room temperature. You certainly don't want to be using cold butter. Cold butter does not mix very well, and you'll get lumps of butter in your cake, which is not a nice taste. So let me just concentrate so I'll get my readings right. 195, spot on. So we're going to cream that in our stand mixer for about 3 minutes. Let me just get that all set up. 1 second. So if you are new to my channel, I say a big welcome and thank you for joining me on this impromptu live. And if you're watching the replay, thank you, you're welcome. On my channel, I am dedicated to helping everyone make amazing cakes. So if you've always wanted to learn how to make amazing cakes, that's what Dr. Mummy Cakes channel is. If you hit the subscribe button, you will know every time I post a new video, so you'll not miss out on anything. Okay, and let me just drag that there so you can see what happened in the stand mixer. 2 seconds. As I said, this is an impromptu video, so I have not quite got everything all together, so I do apologize. Using a stand mixer. If you have a hand mixer, that would work as well. And you're just going to be creaming that. Initially start on a slower speed until the sugar starts to be incorporated. And then you can crank it up slowly and go to a higher speed. And we're going to cream that together for about 3 minutes until it's nicely combined and fluffy. And then we'll intermittently be scraping down our bowl at some point to get it nicely mixed together. Excuse me. Hi, Easily Better. Hi. Hi to you and the second other person that's watching me live. Thank you. Okay. So you can see it starts to cream, but it's not quite there. But you want to scrape down your bowl. So the reason why recipes will say scrape down your bowl is because oftentimes the bit right at the bottom of your mixer doesn't mix well properly, and if you don't scrape down your bowl, then you'll have mixture at the bottom that's not quite mixed properly, and that affects the consistency of your batter and ultimately your final cake. So do scrape your bowls down intermittently. Okay, we'll go for another minute or so. And what we can do while that is creaming, let's measure out our flour. So again, the same amount, 195 grams of flour. Self-raising flour is what I'm using for this recipe. Okay, that's 195 grams of flour. And I'm just going to scoot back over to the creamed butter and sugar mixture. And you can start to see that the mixture is increased in volume. Let me turn that on so you can hear me. You can start to see that the mixture has increased in volume. So you can see that it's looking paler, it's looking more fluffy. So this is when we say cream your butter and your sugar together, that's what we want. And the reason the volume has increased is you are incorporating air into the mixture. And air, when you bake your cake, translates to nice and fluffy cupcakes, which is what we like. So I think I'm just going to whip it for another minute or so, and then it'll be ready to move on to the next step. it's ready. So if you didn't know and you were just looking at it, or if you just tuned in and you've just randomly skipped all the goodness at the start of the video, you might think that actually this is the formed batter, but this is just the cream, sugar, and butter. This is what it should look like. Creaming is a method of mixing, which is probably the commonest mixing method that you will find. Sorry, let me just wash my hands, keep it clean. And it's a perfect way of baking cakes. If you're a beginner, it will work quite well. Okay, so we're going to add the eggs now. So you want to go on medium or low speed, and then you add the eggs one at a time and allow for a couple of seconds for that egg to mix with the mixture. You can crank it up a little bit to go faster. Add the rest of your eggs. And your last eggs. Once you've added your last egg, just whisk for about a minute to get all that to be incorporated into the mixture. And next we're going to add the vanilla, so about a teaspoon. Yes, I'm not measuring it, but I roughly know what about a teaspoon of vanilla is. Mix that in. Before we do that, let's just give the bowl one last final scrape to get all that nicely combined. Okay. So next we're going to then add the flour. You just pour all the flour in there at once. Once you've added the flour, the one thing that you will see in all cake recipes is that you should be very careful not to overmix your cakes. You just want to mix until just combine at that stage. And what I like to do and what I would recommend until you get the hang of the baking process is for you to just mix on low speed for a short period of time, just to get most of the flour combined into the mixture, and then switch by hand. Right here, I like to try and get every single bit of the batter off my mixer attachment. Waste not, want one. Waste not, want not, as they say. And then I'm going to switch to mixing it by hand. Let me just create more room. So if you do the rest of the thing by hand, actually, this is a bit awkward. I'm going to get a bigger spatula. 1 second. if you do the rest of the mixing by hand, then you're less likely to overmix, and because you have more control. So what you're trying to do is just get the flour incorporated into it. Don't worry if there are little few lumps, that's fine. And you certainly don't want to overmix, because overmixing works the gluten in your mixture and leads to a tough cake. So we're just going to get, it's all undone, not to worry. And so with the cupcakes, tips for getting a good cupcake is one, excuse me, just going to adjust that, is one, use good quality cupcake liners and don't overfill your cupcake. You want to allow for some room. For the cupcake to expand. So I like to use I don't know if you can actually see, a ice cream scoop, because then I can give a precise amount of batter into every mixture. You want to fill like 2/3 of the way. Or about 2/3 or half, certainly any more than that, then you're not going to allow for enough room for your cupcakes to expand, and it will overfill. So don't overfill. If you underfill, that's fine. You can always rectify that when you top up with frosting. And you're just going to add that. So you can see that when I add the cake batter, the weight of the batter just nicely pushes down the cupcake into the slot all on its own. So that still preserves the shape of the cupcake. I'm sort of giving about 1.5. So one huge big scoop and then a smaller halfish type scoop. Your batter is thick, so that's deliberate. It's not thin like, say, a chocolate cake recipe, or some of my other cake recipes do have much thinner cake batter. So this one is thick and it's deliberate. So just go round and adding some more in that. And actually, so what you can do is just tap, just to get the cake batter to settle, and then you can judge which ones need a little bit more. Just let's add a little bit more, and the ones that look underfilled. So actually, this measurement, 195 grams to 3 medium-sized eggs, is probably about enough for 12 cupcakes. So I will make another batch to fill the other cupcake case. So if you're making 24, then you probably need if you're making 24, you'll need to use basically double that mixture. That quantity. So 6 eggs, and then the weight of the 6 eggs. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Just a final tap. And then a final look. Nope, there are still some that are slightly underfilled. Just add a tiny bit more. I think this one just needs a fraction. And yeah, this one. It's just a tad bit more. Yeah, I did say use the ice cream scoop, but it's actually a lot more difficult because the batter is thick. If I was doing like a chocolate, then it'll be easier to judge. So I think once I've done this one, so it's going to go in the oven. It will take approximately 15 minutes, well, 12 to 15 minutes to bake. While it's doing that, because I do really want to show you the final cake, I'm going to show you something. There's going to be a tutorial coming up. So this is on how to make edible glitter. So this is actually rice paper. Rice paper that's been soaked into water containing black food dye and allowed to basically dry. And when you blend that up, you get that, which is like, looks like edible glitter. So that's quite a neat trick. And you can use that to decorate your cake. So one of my recent cakes, I had that. So I use that to decorate. So that is just rice paper if you blend it up. Actually, why don't we try that now? So I'm just going to get my blender attachment, if I can find it. And I'm going to pour that in. So one look at that. And then I'm just going to blend it. Let me get a bowl. It's quite super neat, isn't it? It's like edible glitter, edible glass dust. You can sprinkle that on your cake, decorate on your cake, and it's perfectly edible. If you want the really finer bits, you can sieve it, and there you go. So that is just made from waste paper, and it's perfectly edible, and it's a great alternative if you do not want to use commercial edible glitter, if you're concerned about the ingredients and stuff, although commercial glitter is safe to eat if you're buying good quality ones. So I'm not sure what else to do. We're just going to hang around until the cake bakes in a couple of minutes. Or actually, what we might get started on is just doing the other batch. So setting that up. So this recipe, like I said, it's it's based on actually a Victoria sponge cake recipe. And it's a simple one. I do have other vanilla cake recipes on my page, which have a different texture. And then sometimes it's good to play around with the ingredients that you have and using different cupcake recipes to get the recipe that you want. I'm just peeking at the cupcakes. So again, one thing that you want to do is avoid the temptation of constantly hello. Avoid the temptation of constantly opening up your oven when your cakes are baking, because if you open the oven, you will change the temperature inside your oven and create a draft, and this can ultimately affect the temperature inside the oven. And you may have heard me say that temperature is a very important factor to consider when your cakes are baking. You want your cakes to bake at an even temperature, which is why, one, we preheat the oven before we start, and we don't want anything to affect the temperature. So don't open up the oven until your cake is nearly done. With the cupcake, to be honest, it only takes about 10 to 12 minutes. So you shouldn't be checking on it that much. If it's a cake and you want to check, is it done? I often say that wait a little bit. So if your recipe says bake for about 30 minutes, then don't check it 10 minutes after it's gone into the oven, because it's not going to be ready by then. If it's 20 minutes, 25, then you can check it, because again, ovens are a funny thing. Depending on your oven, your oven might cook quicker than mine or be slower than mine. So yes, checking it sort of near towards the end of the cooking time is quite useful. And then you know if your cake is nearly done, still has a while to go, and then that just helps you judge. Other tips, I talked about using room temperature ingredients. That goes for your butter or margarine or your eggs. So if you store your eggs in the fridge, then make sure that you bring it out beforehand and allow it to come to room temperature. This just helps with the mixing of your ingredients, because cold butter, trying to get that to mix with your sugar, it's not going to cream properly, and certainly it's not going to mix properly with your flour. Other points that we've covered is about overmixing. That is, I cannot overstress the importance of that. If you overmix your batter, you are going to develop the gluten molecules inside your cake, and that will lead to a tough cake. So if you're making bread, then yes, you work bread, you need bread, because you want to really, really, really work the strands of the molecules of the flour to get a tougher bread-like consistency. But we don't want that with our cakes. We want nice, soft, fluffy cakes. So yeah, those are the tips that I can share with you from this cooking tutorial, and it applies to every other cake that you use. Yes, your ingredients. So I always say the baking, you don't have to use the most expensive ingredients. It doesn't always translate to a better cake, but use the right ingredients and the quality ingredients. So things that I haven't found in my experience to make that huge of a difference. So sugar, I use my supermarket brand sugar. I haven't found any difference between that and more premium fancy sugar. The same goes with flour. With margarine and butter, I prefer to use margarine because where I live in the UK, I get good quality margarine. I would either use a brand name like Stork, or I have found with the way things are a bit more expensive, when I tried a couple more supermarket brand margarine, they work well. The caveat is try and use margarine that is designed for baking, because those ones have the right fat consistency, fat to water ratio that works well for baking. If you go and use your margarine that is designed for spreading on your bread, then you might actually find that that doesn't work well. But I think that if you're using a margarine that's designed for baking, then you will get good results. Or you can use butter. That's the traditional ingredients, and that works just as well. So you can use margarine or butter for your cakes. When you're making buttercream, and if you don't know how to make buttercream, I have an amazing live that I did recently, about last month, showing you how to make American buttercream. So you can check it out. But if you are making buttercream, then yeah, margarine will just not cut it. You need to use proper butter. And then, like I said, you need to make sure that you use vanilla extract and not vanilla essence. So 2 seconds, let me just go and have a look at the cake. You can sneak peek. So it's risen. Nearly done, but not quite. So we'll just leave that for a couple more minutes and then it will be done. Okay. And here I'm just getting my wire rack handy. So whenever your cupcake is done, you want to take them out of the cupcake cases and cool them on a wire rack. So let me go and check the cupcakes again. It should be done. Not quite. So the way to test if your cake is done. So what I did was just inserted this cocktail stick. I don't know if you can see. It's still got raw batter. So that means it's not done. So just give it a couple more minutes till it's done. So I might just go back to having the camera on me, and we can just keep chatting. Unfortunately, there is one amazing person watching, and there's no further questions. So I'm just going to chat away about cakes. I'm so passionate about cakes. So other tips to give you if you are new to baking is make sure that you use a recipe that works. So for me, I can put my hand on my chest and say all my recipes work because I don't put anything on my channel that doesn't work. But then there are lots of other, well reputable bakers, both on Instagram and who have blogs that you can try and use, and it will work well. If you have a recipe that you try that doesn't work, what do you do? It could be the recipe. It could just be the variation in lots of different things. So I find that sometimes the recipe only tells you so much. There are other fundamentals that you may not be able to pick up from the recipe if you're not used to baking. And that's part of why I started my channel, because I would try out cake recipes and I do everything what the recipe says, but it wouldn't work. And I'd be sitting there thinking, why hasn't it worked? And I discovered that a lot of times the recipes don't tell you things like, like I said, make sure it's at room temperature, why it's important to preheat your oven, what preheating your oven is all about, how to line your cake tin, which I have on my channel. So a lot of my videos go through those little fundamental things about baking to equip you with the knowledge so that you have that at the back of your mind. And by the time that you are baking your cake, you're automatically putting all that in to practice because you understand the principles of baking, and then you can make a yummy and delicious cake. So once again, if you are watching this on a replay and you haven't subscribed and you always wanted to learn how to bake, then please consider subscribing to my channel and then watching all my videos, and then you'll never miss when I post a video. So I'm just going to go and check on the cupcakes. They're not quite done. What I might just do is, if you are new, I'm just going to show you on my tablet my YouTube channel and all the lovely things that you can find. So if you look for Drmummycakes on YouTube channel, just search for Drmummy. Your cupcakes should look like. So I would like to say